Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your guide to the whitetail woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light, go farther, stay longer. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this week on the show, we are joined by David Kenyon, my father, to see what we can learn from his experience raising a hunting and fishing fool. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast brought to you by First Light. And today we are continuing our series on parenting and parenting outdoor kids, helping bring our children into the hunting and fishing and outdoor world, helping to foster a love for wildlife and adventure and, engaging with animals and fish and wild places, all the good stuff that I know that if you're listening to this show, you have come to love just as much as I have. And as we discussed last week when Tony and I kind of kicked off this topic, there's no right answer to many of these questions. There's so many shades of gray. There's so many different perspectives. There's so many different ways of going about this, ultimate task of our lives, really. I think anyone who has become a parent knows and has felt deep in your bones how it changes everything. And that includes hunting. That includes your passion for white-tailed deer, or fishing for trout, or whatever it is that you like to do. But it's something we don't talk about a whole lot. We love to talk about pinch points and funnels and food plots and scouting and all that good stuff. But then we just kind of assume that, we'll just know what to do when it comes to taking our daughters or sons out in the woods. We'll just figure it out as we go when it comes to teaching them how to fish. Why don't we explore this in more detail? Why don't we give this as much attention as we do soil amendments and archery technique? That's the question I've been asking myself here recently, and that's why we're doing this series. I think it deserves some time, some thought, and some different perspectives, some new ideas. So when it comes to experts on this topic, there aren't really any true experts. There's just a whole lot of people with some kind of experience. And when it comes to people that have some kind of experience, I know one person especially well that I have a very clear understanding, at least a personal understanding of what they did and the results it led to. And of course, I'm talking about my own dad. And I know the results because the results are me. You are listening to me. You have found this podcast. This podcast is here and now and in the world. And the host you're listening to loves deer and fishing and wildlife and all sorts of crazy things like that. It's all because of him, this guy, David Kenyon. He mentored me, taught me, guided me into the outdoors, helped me understand how to engage in the natural world, come to love it, come to appreciate it, become capable within it, and so many other things. And so my thought today was, who better to kind of dive into this with than someone who I grew up with doing this very thing, and see if I can learn something from him right now in a different kind of way than I did when I was actually a child following him along. But what can I learn now, looking back on it all, and kind of explicitly poking holes and shining a light on different sides of it, and zooming in with a microscope and kind of picking apart what worked, what didn't work, what worked for me, what worked for him, what do I remember, what does he remember, and how did all of this lead to who I am now. This is a shared point of context, right? When you listen to other folks talking about hunting and talking about their kids, we don't really know what they're talking about, right? We hear the words they're saying, but we can't actually get a look at the results of what they're telling you to do. In this case, it's unique. When you hear my dad share his thoughts and ideas and perspectives, you all pretty well know what came from it. So I think this gives us an interesting opportunity to hear what he has to say, and then look at me and what I'm doing, whether, you might hear what my dad has to say, and they're like, oh, well, that's why Mark's so messed up, or that's why Mark's so annoying, or that's why Mark is whatever. Or you might say, man, okay, Mark loves hunting and fishing, and this thing his dad did, I get it now. I can see how that led to Mark having this love. Maybe I can try something like that too. So I don't know. Maybe we're going to have ideas like that. Maybe we'll have the opposite. I'm not sure where this is going to go, but I do know that my dad, David Kenyon, is someone who approaches things with a lot of thought, with a lot of care, and with a life journey, I think, that gives his advice and his ideas a sense of weight. My dad is someone who has pushed through a lot of things, worked through a lot of things, and always has been able to find the light in it, has been able to find the lesson in it, the wisdom that can be gained from whatever it might be. And I think that makes him a particularly helpful person to listen to when it comes to parenting. Because anyone out there who is a parent knows that it's not always easy. It's not always cut and dry. It's not always fun. It's not always a straight and narrow path that you can walk on easily. It is a journey. And my dad's been on that journey for many years now. I'm fortunate that he's been guiding me down that path too. And I'm appreciative of the fact that he's willing to hop on here and take some tough questions from his son. And I hope you all enjoy it as much as I did. So without further ado, let's dive into this second episode of our parenting series with my very own father, David Kenyon. Okay, now with me on the other side of the internet is a special guest. More special, I guess I'm biased here, but more special than most I have on the show. We've got my father, the one and only David Kenyon. Thanks for doing this, Dad.
Hey, glad to do it, Mark. Excited to be part of the Wire to Hunt team.
Yes, I've gotten great feedback from people on the past episodes you've joined us. So, we've got a reputation to live up to now, Dad. We've done a few of these over the years. I think the first one, if my memory serves me right, it was you, me, and Josh up at the cabin. Mm-hmm. And we talked kind of about the history up there and our hunts and stuff. And then I think we maybe did another show after you killed your buck at the back 40. I think that was the next one we did. And I, of course, enjoyed those. And I think during one or both of those, or at some point, I think I had asked you a little bit about what I was like as a kid and what it was like, raising me a touch. But I think that was like a snippet of our conversation. But what I want to do today, if you're willing to do this, is to expand on that dramatically. Because as you know, we're doing this short series around parenting and parenting kids that, learn to love hunting and fishing and the outdoors and the natural world and all that kind of stuff. And, when I'm sitting here at my desk and thinking through who do I know that has done that well, I can't think of anyone better than you. But that is because I am, of course, the product of that training and that parenting. But here I am. I love hunting. I love fishing. I love the natural world. And I'm obsessed with all the above. So I would like to raise a kid like me someday. So I suppose you are one of the best people I know to teach me how to do it, Dad. So that's the goal today. Are you up for the challenge?
I am, but I sure hope I don't let you and your audience down.
Here's the next question then. I know you very well. And I know that you have dad blinders sometimes. Like you wear rose-colored dad glasses. By that I mean you are so biased in your appreciation of your son, which I appreciate. But what I'm going to ask you to do here, Pops, is to be as objective, unbiased, and honest as possible as we talk about these things.
Do you really want me to be brutally honest?
Yes. So if
Okay.
if there's something you remember from my childhood where I drove you really nuts and I was a real a-hole, you should say that. Okay? You don't need to
How
pretend
many
like
times? Do I have a quota? Do I have a quota?
we'll see. I might cut you off somewhere down the line.
Okay.
But that's what I want to do here. I want to, as a kid with my dad, I can look back on all of our experiences together and try to glean insights from the things I experienced as a kid. But now as a dad myself, I'm, and I'm sure you experienced this when, I was a kid. There wasn't like a handbook. There wasn't anyone that gave you like, here are the rules, or here's the playbook, or here are the step-by-step directions for how to do this right, how to raise a kid, how to introduce these things to them. So it's kind of, I don't know how many kids and their parents get an opportunity to actually have like a thorough conversation about this and ask the questions explicitly that maybe that you wonder about, but you don't ever talk about. So I've got a few of those for you.
All right. Well, shoot, man.
And I guess to begin it, it might be useful, and I think it'd be interesting for me even if we were to rewind the clock even further back. Let's go back not just to when I was a kid, but let's go one generation further back and go back to when you were a kid, which I imagine some of those experiences were what informed you then when you started parenting me, right?
Yeah.
So do you remember or what can you remember about the earliest exposure or memory you have of hunting or fishing with your dad? What's that thing that sticks out for you still? Does something come to mind?
Yeah. Grandpa, my dad, he loved the outdoors, and it was, he was kind of a product of the Depression, product of the Second World War, very strong-minded, strong, powerful personality. And as I think many, particularly men, but in that generation, had a challenge, I think, really connecting personally with us as kids. So his way of being able to do that was through the outdoors. So the thing I remember that was most memorable was, and not that my dad didn't spend time with us. He did lots of different things. But where we really connected, where I really felt that I knew my dad best and really enjoyed being with him, and we'd have great conversations, et cetera, was when we were hunting and fishing. And we spent a lot of time doing that, as you know, Mark. We every opportunity we got, we were out in the boat fishing during the spring and the summer. And every opportunity we got to go up to the cabin or go out in the woods to do hunting, we did during the fall and during the winter and early fall as well for different kinds of animals. And so for me, I grew up outside, and I grew up loving and appreciating the outdoors and loving and appreciating the relationship that I had with my dad and with my brother because of that. So for me, it was very formative in that it created and I think really helped me grow into the kind of person that I was. And, I'm not jumping ahead of a generation yet, but that's why that was so important to me that you had that experience, because I had it. And that was a primary way, as for me at least, to connect with my dad.
Do you remember, do you have like a moment that you can think back on specifically? Is there a story that when I say, all right, tell me about one of these formative early in your life moments with your dad, hunting or fishing, that like, is there a movie that can still play in your mind of one of these days or one of these mornings? Can you tell me about one of those?
I can. It's a little bit challenging choosing just one, because honestly, I have a bunch. But let me throw out one, maybe two, that are really, I think, exemplary of what I'm speaking of. So we did very little hunting up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Most of our hunting was down in the southern and Baldwin and some of those areas in mid-Michigan when I was really young, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. But one time, my dad wanted to go up to the UP. I think he had heard from some of his friends about an area that was pretty well stocked with big bucks. And the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, for those that don't know, is, especially back then, was quite remote. Big, tall stands of pines and a lot of conifers, very deep woods. The interesting thing is because there's very little agriculture up there, although it's beautiful terrain, not a lot of food for the deer. So when you did find deer, they oftentimes were bigger, but they're fewer and far between because of that. But anyway, so I remember one time, I don't know exactly how old I was, maybe 6, 7 years old. My dad got me up and said, "Hey, Dave, we're going to go hunting, but it's a long ways away. We've got to take off early in the morning." So he got me up at 3 in the morning. We're on the road by 4, and we drove up to I don't even know where in the Upper Peninsula it was, but it was a ways beyond the Mackinac Bridge. And so like I say, it was probably 7 years old. And back then, and you and I have talked about this before, Mark, this is before all the fancy clothing. I remember even seeing a pair of Sorel boots on the shelves at the local store was a really big deal. We just didn't have the quality and the level of technology in terms of outdoor clothing that we have today. So I had an orange sweatshirt, some pull-on flannel jeans that, I had, and then Grandma, who was a knitter, knitted up a hat and a knit scarf, and that's what I went into the woods with. And it was certainly better than nothing, but I got to tell you, I froze my butt off in the woods. So we get up to our spot up in the UP. It's maybe 7 o'clock because it's a 3 or 4 hour drive. We, very quietly sneak out to the woods. And because we hadn't been here, we hadn't set up any blinds or anything like that. It was kind of find the best tree. That's the other thing that's so different about today. 9 times out of 10, we just go find a tree someplace and sit next to it. I'd sit on one side, my dad would sit on the other. And that's what we did in this particular situation. And overnight, a snowstorm had come in. It wasn't snowing down south, but it was snowing hard up in the UP. So these big, beautiful snowflakes falling down, and all the big pine trees were covered with snow, and the branches were draping low. So as we went into the woods, there was probably a foot of snow on the ground, and it was brutally cold. So a cold front had come in. It was, I don't know what the temp was, but I'm guessing 10 above, 15 above. For a little kid, it was really cold. So anyway, so we sneak into the woods, and, I'm following along. I've got this, I'm all bundled up in 4 or 5 layers with this orange sweatshirt on top and a knitted cap and a knitted scarf around. And I'm just kind of waddling into the woods behind my dad. And, he'd say, "Come on, Dave, let's go. You can do it." And he'd just pull me in, and I'd follow him in. These big, beautiful trees I remember seeing with all that snow all over the branches and hanging down. And it just seemed surreal. It was like being on another planet. It was absolutely beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, absolutely freezing. So we get out to the tree. We find a tree someplace, and really all I remember is it was very thick, beautiful, just gorgeous, big snowflakes the size of quarters falling. And we get to this blind. Again, he sat on one side, I sat on the other, and he would always bring a blanket. And so after I sat down, he'd take the blanket and kind of wrap me up in that blanket. Right? So all you could see is my head poking up above this little cocoon. And so we're waiting. And Grandpa, just like you and I, Mark, has some great conversations when we're going up to hunting and that sort of thing. So did he and I. And one of the things, and this is one of the takeaways certainly I took, is, he talked about how great it was to be able to go hunting, the kind of experience of hunting, what to look out for, how to see the deer and spot the deer out in the woods, and what to do if you do see a deer, and how to communicate with him. All those things we talked about all the way up. So by the time we got to the Upper Peninsula and we started going out of the woods, I was really stoked. I was excited. So we trod back in. He puts me on one side, sits on the other side of this big old pine tree. And what do you do when you're 7 years old and you're walked in a half a mile and it's colder than all get out? You fall asleep. So that's what I did.
Yeah. And you're still doing that same thing today.
So a couple hours later, as I recall, I woke up and I'm just freezing. Like my toes are cold, my nose is cold, my ears are cold, and I'm just I'm shaking and I'm shivering. And Grandpa, of course, is on the other side of the blind, and he said, Dave, be quiet. I think I see something. I hear something. I'm going, "Oh, yeah, right. Sure, Dad. I'm freezing, and you're going to hear." But it turns out that was a false alarm. A little bit later, though, He says, damn, and just touches my shoulder from the back of the tree. And around comes a cup of hot chicken soup in a thermos. And it was the best thing ever. It was like dying and going to heaven, right? For a little guy. So it was a combination of hot soup, hot cocoa, and Nestle's chocolate bars that kept me going during those hunting trips. So did we shoot a big deer? No. Did we, see a monster come through the woods, and was it the best hunt of my life? No. Was it one of those memories that I'll hold dear forever? Because it was that special time that I had with my dad. And it was one of those experiences that clinched it for me as to why I love going deer hunting.
Yeah, it's an interesting example, too, because it's, one of the cliche pieces of advice, and probably because there's truth to it, when it comes to introducing your kids to hunting or fishing, is to, always make sure it's fun, right? Keep it fun, keep it light. Mm-hmm. But what you just described there was kind of miserable and challenging for a lot of it. And then punctuated by a little moment of heaven.
Yeah.
So, what do you think your dad did best? Like, when you look back and try to understand why did you end up falling in love with this stuff, kind of knowing your dad's teaching style or just his personality or whatever it is, what do you think worked as far as how he taught you and Steve to engage in these things and brought you guys to a point where you loved it and wanted to do it yourselves? What did he do right?
Yeah. I think there were a couple of things my dad did really well. One is he was always teaching. He was always talking to us about the woods and about hunting and fishing and the different aspects of it. But it was always a teaching mode. It was always, hey, remember to do this. Remember how to do that. Be careful about this. Remember they're walking through the woods. And then just my dad was really good at building excitement. And Mark, I think you can relate to this, right? I mean, we go into the cabin and there's a dozen outdoor life or the latest deer hunting magazine sitting on the table. Grandpa would pull it up and talk about an article he just saw. And he made it fun. The other thing is that my dad transitioned from being a teacher to being a coach. And I think that's really critical. So, a teacher explains to you what to do, describes what to do, and leads you through it. A coach stands back and watches you do it, and then just at the right time and the right place strategically adds a little hint, a little piece of information to help you do a little bit better. And my dad was good at that as we got older.
When did that transition start to happen? Or when do you recall when that shift started to take place?
Yeah, somewhere around 45.
It took him a little while. Huh?
I know. Yeah, I know. No, I'd say it was maybe 12. I would say 14 in that time frame. Because we'd been hunting with him. That shift from us being with him and he was the hunter to us being with him and we were also the hunter. Because there was a period where we would carry our when I was 12, 14 years old, and I had a 22, 14, 410 over and under. There were times when we would both sit on either side of the tree, and he just that was kind of his mentoring, right? It was to kind of coach us through that. But I'd say sometime after that, we transitioned to that pure coach. And again, like I say, my dad was really good at that.
What was your dad not good at? What do you recall when you look back on those early days when you were hunting and fishing that did not help you fall in love with these things or teach you that? Was there anything that almost made you not want to do these things?
Although my dad was a good teacher and a good coach, he sometimes could be impatient. And, there's another thing that I think I need to put on the plus side before I talk about the negative. The other thing my dad was really, really good at is making us excited and making it fun. Okay. So those were on the plus side. But I think on the negative side, I think the patience at times was a struggle with him. So my father was very goal-oriented, a perfectionist in what he did. And although he was really good at teaching and coaching, I think he at times was impatient with how, we're 10-year-old kids or 8-year-old kids or whatever. So I'd say that that's something that I tried to do with you is to be a lot more patient and allowed you to maybe make your own mistakes. And that's okay because you learn through mistakes.
Yeah. What when you look back on those early years, is there a lesson or one single thing, if you had to take one thing that you learned from your dad that when you became a dad yourself you thought would be foundational in how you parented me and Kristen? What would be that most important thing? And I'm sure you probably mentioned an example maybe, but what was that, if there was, ultimate lesson that you took with you?
It's interesting you bring it up, and this is kind of tied to some of what we just talked about. It's kind of a hard transition for me to make, and I think every parent needs to keep this in mind. We joke about how when you were young and we were walking through the woods before the age of 6 or 7, let's say, it was somewhere around that, 6, 7, maybe 8. I was in front, I was leading, I was kind of giving you perspective and saying, watch out for that log mark, so on and so forth. Somewhere around that transition, something flipped. And it was you in front, you telling me to watch out for the log. and I think what's really important as a parent is to allow that to happen, is to encourage that transition. Don't be threatened by it. Don't. And I remember, in a different domain, but I remember when you and I were bass fishing and doing bass fishing tournaments, and there was a point at which you knew more than I did. You were better at it than I was, and it would have been easy to kind of maybe not resent it, but kind of react to that a little bit. And I think it's really important as a parent to allow your kids to express themselves and be their own persons, even if that means they might be a little bit more knowledgeable or a little bit better at something that you love and do. So it'd be different if I didn't really care for deer hunting, or it'd be different if I didn't really care for bass fishing. But I love both, and you were better than I was, and that's okay, and that's a good thing. But I think that's something important to recognize and encourage. It's not about, and I think men in particular, we tend to be, or at least the men I know, we tend to be so competitive. And sometimes it's easy to translate that into our relationship with our kids as well.
So you mentioned, my early days as a kid, and I know a story you told before is about when I was, little guy, and we were going out hunting, and I was 3 or 4 on the floor of the blind, just playing with toys and napping and all that kind of stuff. So one thing I noticed that I can recall, I think this mirrors what you experienced as a kid, was that, you took me whenever you were going, it seems like. I don't honestly remember a whole lot of hunting or fishing trips that you went on when I was alive that I wasn't on. Like I can remember, I remember once you went to Canada on a fishing trip without me. I remember that one.
Yeah.
But I can't recall a whole lot other than that. So you were dragging me along in all these things with you. What was that like when I was 3 or 4 or 5 and you had your own passion for the thing, hunting or fishing, but now you had this tag along who's slower, louder, more easily distracted. I know what that experience has been like for me as an adult, but what was that like for you? And having a 3-year-old, 4-year-old little Mark Kenyon messing up your hunting and fishing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good point, and I think it certainly impacts your success. It impacts, and I think you're like me, Mark. You're much more than me in terms of being very goal oriented and everything's formalized. And you've got a strategy and a plan for how you're going to approach a particular hunt or whatever. And when something doesn't work out, it doesn't go exactly to plan, it's easy to get upset by that. It's really easy to get frustrated by that. I think when you're, again, I'll point back to Grandpa for this. Grandpa was just really good. And no matter how, he was very serious, a very serious hunter and a very serious fisherman. But we were always first. So he never compromised that experience, his experience, for us. He always prioritized us over that. And I think that's what I tried to do with you, and I think that's what you do with your kids. So it's not about, as much as we love the sport, if you really want to, so I think another thing that's really important about teaching our kids to love the outdoors and to love, the sports that we enjoy, that I think a lot of people may not appreciate. It is not just about getting them outdoors and giving them the experience and that sort of thing. It's about building deep relationships that are going to last a lifetime. Because I really think that's what this is all about. It's not about catching the biggest fish or shooting the biggest deer. It's really about love for God's creation and nature, and building a really strong relationship with the ones you love and doing that. And I think that's what I've learned from my dad. And I think that's what I see you doing with your kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before on the podcast, or maybe you said, I can't remember who, but if we hadn't had hunting and fishing, I don't know what kind of relationship we would have had.
You're right. Yeah.
Because
we're very different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like that. This has been that one thing that has really brought us together on something we have a shared interest in and passion for and vocabulary around.
Yep. You're right.
So you brought up something though that raises a question that I have been, struggling with at times, or I guess recognizing in myself. A challenge I guess I've recognized in myself is that I have found myself wanting success when I'm out there with the kids. And as you mentioned, I'm goal oriented, I'm hard charging. I think there's a lot of other hunters and anglers out there like that too, who want to get the turkey. I want to shoot the buck. I want to catch the big fish. And so I have caught myself sometimes out there with Everett or Colton, and I want success so badly. And I think like, man, if only we could shoot this buck with Everett here, it would be so incredible and it'd be such a great moment for him. And I'm thinking about this for him, but then I'll catch myself. So an example, I talked about this last week with Tony. An example of this was this past hunting season. I think I told you the story. There was this opportunity that me and Everett had to go after like a 4.5-year-old actual mature buck here in Michigan. And I was like, man, we actually have a chance to kill this big old buck with Everett. Like everything's set up perfect. And he was excited about it. And I thought this would just be incredible. Like this is going to be so great. But what happened over the course of these 2 hunts is that because I was putting this extra pressure on it, because I thought we had a real chance to kill this big old buck, everything all of a sudden, like everything was ramped up. The pressure on every time he talked too loud, or every time he moved too much, or every time it was just like I was on a hair trigger because of that, because I wanted it so bad for him. But then I realized at some point down the road, like he doesn't really care about that. He just wants to have a good time. He just wants to be out here with me. And am I hurting his ability to have a good time because I'm trying to put my goals on his, or impose my goals on him? So did you ever, I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, did you ever encounter that? How did you deal with that? What did you do? Did you ever have a time back in the day when, man, you want to catch fish so bad because you knew I'd be stoked about it, but then, I was just in la la land, and did you push through that? Did you try to get me over the hump, or did you say, all right, no, this is going to be a worm collecting mission because that's what Mark wants to do? Like, what's your recommendation for dealing with that? Or where's that balance point?
Well, I think it's I think you hit on some really good points. And I think one of the maybe guiding principles is to remember that it's more about the relationship, especially with your kids, right? When you're with your friends, when you're with your favorite hunting buddy, then that's all different. But when you're with your kids or your family, I think it's more about the relationship than it is about the trophy. And I think keeping things in perspective, and one of the things I tried to do, and I think it's really important right up front, is set your expectations appropriately. Think about it ahead of time. Think about the great experience you're going to have. Think about maybe the big buck that's going to walk out in front of you when you're with your son. But then remind yourself that it doesn't matter how big the deer is. It doesn't matter whether you even see a deer. Going back to your point, Mark, some of my best hunts with my dad, we never shot a deer. That wasn't what I remember. What I remember is the conversations we had, or the time, the chicken soup that he passed around the tree to me. That's what I remember. Those are the things that, 10 years from now, from then, gave me the passion for wanting to be outdoors and being with him and being able to hunt and fish. So think of it as the seeds that you're planting that are going to grow into the love for the outdoors. And sometimes seeds need watering, and sometimes you need to prune a few of those dead branches. And some of those dead branches aren't on the one you're hunting with; they're in you. And so I think that's really important. I think that's really key. And it's really hard. I think not to say that this isn't a challenge for women as well, but I think it's particularly a challenge for men because we tend to be so competitive.
So along those same lines, another one of my debates that I continue to return to when I'm outside with the boys is something I'm curious about how you dealt with. I see, as we talked about, hunting and fishing and all these outside activities as a great opportunity to have fun with the kids, right? You want to keep it fun. You want to make it fun for them. You want to focus on what their experience is, right? All these things you just mentioned. On the flip side, though, I've also seen hunting and fishing in the outdoors as this great arena for developing resilience and toughness and, becoming comfortable discomfort, right? Like these experiences where we are pushed beyond what we think is possible. I have found those to be, such critical parts of what that hunting and fishing experience has been for me. Like if I didn't have that, how would I have developed these characteristics? And so I want that for my kids too. I want them to be pushed. I want them to have to deal with the tough stuff and push through it and develop mental toughness and all that. So how did you go about walking that line between the two, between keeping it fun but not making it so cushy that I never had to deal with the tough stuff? Was that something you were thinking about at any point over those years?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the ways we did that, something we haven't talked about yet that's kind of related to this. And the phrase that I would use is feed the habit. Remember that, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
So feeding the habit is when we go to Cabela's or our favorite sporting goods store. You were there with me. We were going through, we were talking about, the gear that we want to pick up for our next hunt or the gear we're going to buy for the next tournament we're going to fish. And very quickly, you started studying and looking at what the best equipment was. And you would be, teaching me in many cases, because that became an internal passion for you. So I think a couple of things that are really important is, first of all, everybody's different. Every one of your children will be different. So don't try to make a square peg into a round hole. There's some kids, and I can see this with some of our grandkids as well, is that, they approach it maybe a little bit differently than you would, or maybe a little bit different than their sibling. That's okay. Find that way. So, with our daughter, we took a very different approach. But we were able to find her passion or see what her passion was, and then help her discover that. I think there's a couple of key points in that. One is I like that whole euphemism about feeding the habit. It really gets at make sure they don't have to have the best equipment. They don't have to have the best of everything, but it has to be good enough. It has to be good enough that it encourages the experience and enhances the experience. So we didn't go out and buy the $20 Zebco reels and, $10, crappy little pole from Walmart. We spent a little bit of money and got a decent reel and a decent rig, and you were part of that. You were in many cases telling us what you wanted, right? Because you had done the research. I think the other piece is that it's internal. You can never make somebody love something. It really has to come from them. And your job as a parent is not to force them to love your favorite sport. It's to encourage that passion and love inside first. And I think that's how you do it. You make it fun. You feed the habit. So when you see that spark of interest, that spark of, gee, I really enjoy doing this, then encourage it. You don't have to spend a ton of money. It's not about buying the best. It's about buying or encouraging them and equipping them with equipment that's going to allow them to have a positive experience.
Okay, that all makes sense. But I feel like let me rephrase my question. Whoa. Did you ever make me sit it out in the freezing cold blizzard weather when I said I want to go inside? I'm cold. This is miserable. And
especially when you're young. Yes.
Well, no, hear me out though. I want to go inside. I wasn't having fun. Mm-hmm. But did you have situations like where you thought to yourself, all right, I have a choice. Mark says he's cold. Mark says he's not having fun. But this is a teaching moment. This is an opportunity for Mark to to grow a little.
Mhm.
Did you ever have that situation where you had to debate with yourself, like, okay, do we call it quits because this is not type 1 fun anymore? Or were there moments where, like, you know what? I know this isn't fun right now, but this is going to make him a man. This is going to help him grow. This is going to help him learn to deal with the tough shit in life that's coming down the line. What was that something you were explicitly ever thinking about, debating, trying to figure out? Did you do that the right way, do you think, or at all?
Yes and no. So yes, we thought about it. Yes, there are times when you wanted to go in, you were uncomfortable, you weren't ready. But now you're a little bit of a special case in this domain. I mean, you were pretty passionate about it. You were the one that was telling me to stay out in the woods longer in many cases. So this is a little bit different in your case. But I guess what I'm saying is you kind of have to read your audience is really what I'm saying. And yes, reading your audience doesn't mean you just fall at every one of requests, but it also means that there's a very fine line between sticking it out, going the whole way, and having an experience turn into a negative experience that turns you off and encourages you to go off and take up soccer or something else, right? And I think you have to be really careful in how you play that as a parent. So I think, yes, we did, and we have. But I also think it's really important. What's most important is not that you force your kids to stick it out and make them tougher and that sort of thing, but that you understand kind of the psychology behind what is going on in the experience, and help them because these are life lessons. I think that's the other thing that's really important. This isn't about partially about getting outside and hunting and fishing. Yes, it is. It's about that, but even more so, and underlying all that, we're really talking about how you live your life, how you approach failure, how you approach success, how you approach, to your point, Mark, perseverance. That's what you're teaching throughout all this. So think about the lesson that's being learned from their perspective, and make sure that you're taking that into context as you make those decisions.
Yeah. So continuing on a similar line of thinking, then, what I'm giving you here, Dad, is all of my existential questions that I'm trying to figure out. Is like you just described, like there's this line, a very fine line between those two things, and it seems really hard to be able to pin down where the line is. But here's another one that I have thought about a lot, especially with Everett, having more and more interest in getting, really seriously involved with hunts and, wanting to be with me when I shoot a deer, or shooting with his BB gun at an animal, or, going out there and helping me track and gut deer. Like, he wants to be in it and do it all. And so I find myself asking and thinking a lot about, how do I balance this other thing, which is keeping hunting or fishing fun, like just fun, enjoying the experience, but also somehow conveying the seriousness of it. How do I keep a thing fun, but also teach them to respect the animal, to understand the gravity of killing an animal, clubbing a fish, whatever it might be. I could see, I have found myself like battling with like, okay, I want to make sure he understands this, and he's got to take this serious, and he needs to get this. But then I will catch myself and be like, okay, whoa. Am I putting too much on him too soon? And do I just need to let it be fun right now without diving too deep into that, because he's too young to understand that? How do you think about that? How do you do that?
So now I'm going to sound like I'm flipping, because I think those are really important lessons. Now, maybe you're thinking about this as being such an important aspect because I emphasized that, and Grandpa emphasized it with me. So underlying everything I just talked about, all the experiences that we had hunting and fishing, was a really strong sense of how do you be safe? How do you be respectful? How do you make sure you're doing the right thing, and you're hunting or you're fishing or whatever the sport is, whatever the activity is, you're doing it with integrity. And that was, I think, an underlying theme in every conversation we had. And there was one of those things that was absolutely essential. It was non-negotiable is the word I'm looking for. So we started young with that. And that I think we had maybe not as many conversations about those things as we did, the actual process of hunting, but pretty close. I mean, that was pretty important. I mean, can you recite the what was it, TIP? What was the little acronym that Grandpa gave you for how do you carry your weapon and use your weapon?
TPS.
TPS. Okay.
Yeah,
what was that?
T stands for trigger. Never put your finger on the trigger until just before you're about to shoot. P stands for point. Never point your gun at anything unless you're going to shoot it. Always keep it up in the air, down the ground. And S, always make sure your gun is on safety. TPS.
I think I made my point. And that was probably drilled into you when you were probably 6 years old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think you need to do, my opinion is, and everybody's different, so I'm not suggesting that my way is the only way or the best way. But my opinion is that you do that hand in hand with the process of learning how to and loving the sport of hunting. It's just as important, and in some ways even more important, because then these are life lessons. This is not, to me, hunting and fishing is as much about teaching life lessons as it is about the sport itself.
What do you think about what we have now in Michigan and in many states now, where age requirements have been removed? So kind of taking what we're talking about here, how there's so many life lessons, there's all these different important things we're learning as we learn to hunt or fish or shoot, and I think kids can be remarkably mature and ready to understand the gravity of hunting or fishing to some degree at different ages. But, you and I were forced to wait until we were 12 or 14 or whatever it is before we could actually do the thing ourselves because the state regulated it. Now that has been removed in many states because we want to have the opportunity for kids to hunt and fish sooner before they get into video games or competitive sports or whatever and never have the chance to do it. So now,
you and I have had this conversation, right?
Yeah. So there are a lot of 5-year-old kids, 6-year-old kids, 7-year-old kids now who are shooting and killing deer with their dad or their grandpa or a mentor with them, but they're pulling the trigger on animals at 5 years old, 6 years old. What are your thoughts? Not we're not necessarily judging other people for their decisions, but what are your thoughts on the timing of a kid's exposure to that? Given your experience with me, because I'm trying to make that decision right now with Everett. Like when Everett wants to shoot a deer now, he's like, I want to do it. I'm ready, Dad. Yeah. What would your guidance be to me as I try to decide what that appropriate age will be for him?
Yeah, you and I had this conversation a few months ago when you shared this with me. I wasn't aware that many states had lowered or eliminated some of those age requirements. I was shocked, quite honestly. I really struggle with that because I think for a couple of reasons. There are the Mark Kenyons of the world who were very mature and very, I would say, responsible at a very young age as they learned how to hunt. Okay. And you had that structure around you and pounding in your head around safety and that sort of, and, respect for the animal and that sort of thing from a very young age. But not everybody has that, and not everybody is matures at the same rate. And I'm really concerned about that. That I understand why it's being done. I totally understand the need to be able to encourage more hunters in the woods, and I applaud that. But I'm really concerned about that because I'm afraid there are going to be, I'm not even as concerned about there being some terrible accident where somebody gets shot, that sort of thing. But just this generalized sense of, casualness, I guess is the word, about, carrying a firearm or a bow into the woods, and the impact of that, the potential for an accident, but also, and as you know, Mark, one of the things that Grandpa really pounded in my head and your head as well is you never shoot a running deer. Now, why did he do that?
You asking me that? The question for me? Why did he say not to shoot a running deer?
Yeah. Why do you think Grandpa not just said it, he pounded that into our heads?
Yeah, because the rule that we learned was that you would only take the most ethical, quick killing shot you could out of respect for the animal, and that a running shot would not do that.
Right, exactly. And again, I'm not judging somebody who disagrees. I know there's circumstances where that may not be possible. But to me, my suspicion is that not all parents or not all guardians or friends or whatever have that kind of sense. So to me, it seems more dangerous, less respectful, and more likely that we're going to have hunters in the woods who are more likely to kill deer through a wound, not through a kill shot where they find the deer and harvest it. And there'll be more probability for accidents. That's what I'm worried about.
Because kids are getting to start hunting from a younger age. I don't know if I follow you.
Yes. No, so I'm not saying in every case. I'm saying that kids mature at different rates, and I'm concerned about younger kids being in the woods. Now, tell me if this is true, Mark. As part of that process, some of the hunter safety requirements have also been dropped. Isn't that true?
So like in Michigan, you can have, if I recall the last time I looked into this to bring someone out, you had 2 years where you could apprentice as a hunter. So without having to go through hunter safety, you could buy a hunting license and hunt with a licensed mentor for 2 years before you had to complete hunter safety. So that would give you the opportunity to have a kid go out at a younger age before they've gone through the whole thing and experience it, and then go through the hunter safety thing. But again, they have to be with a licensed mentor who has gone through hunter safety, who has done those things. So to devil's advocate, what you're saying, there could be an 8-year-old who goes with his dad, who his dad's sitting right next to him, guides him through everything. He gets this exposure. He gets to experience it. He recognizes that he is into this and is excited about it. Then he goes through the whole hunter safety thing. And then eventually when he's older, he can go off on his own. So this isn't like we're releasing 8-year-olds into the wild by themselves.
Right. Right. And I feel more comfortable with that, I would say. So an apprenticeship kind of approach, I'm more comfortable with. So, but again, this is not a yay or nay or black and white. I'm just a little concerned about. So, and it's also a degree. So if you're talking 8-year-olds versus 10-year-olds versus 12-year-olds, it was 14 when I first got my first license in first year. We were not allowed to hunt younger than that. So I can see both sides of the coin in that regard, Mark, and I do like that apprenticeship kind of mentor approach. But you asked, and that's my kind of where I stand.
But hey, no, I did ask, but you didn't answer my question. My question would be, what would your guidance be to me? Not what's your overall opinion on should younger kids be able to go hunting. My question is...
So you're asking me, what should you do with Everett and Colton?
Yeah, what's your advice to me when I choose when Everett should be able to shoot his first turkey or deer? Because he can accurately shoot a BB gun right now, and next year he'll probably be shooting a 410 or something, or a 22, and a year or two after that, I'm sure he'll be able to shoot a 270 or a 350 or whatever. So within a few years, he will be, I'm pretty darn confident, he will be able to effectively shoot a weapon that would kill a deer or a turkey by the time he's, let's say, 8. If not sooner. Probably could do it sooner, but let's just conservatively say I'm confident he could do that by then. So if you and I were sitting drinking coffee and I told you, hey, man, Everett could do it. He can pull the trigger, aim the thing. He's consistently effective. He wants to go. He wants to get his first deer. He wants to get his first turkey. What would your father advice be to me about the appropriate age, or how to come to determine what that appropriate age is for us? How do you approach that?
So now it's a little bit unfair because I know you and I know your experience and I know how you approach that, right? So with you, quite honestly, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. I wouldn't be concerned. But from a legislative perspective or a regulatory perspective,
I don't care about that. I don't care about that. All I want is just give me the advice.
Okay, I think you should do it.
That's all I want. But tell me more. You're still not answering my question, Dad.
Yeah. What else is new, right?
What's your advice to me about how I think about this? How I determine that proper age for Everett?
So let's play.
Or what questions would you ask me?
let's play devil's advocate a little bit. Okay. Now I don't mean to put you on the spot with your kids, but let me do that just because I know them fairly well. And so you described Everett and his passion for hunting and his carefulness around hunting. You've been coaching him, and I've watched you do this. You are very careful. You do exactly what my dad did with me and with you. So, and Everett also has this really intense focus on hunting. So he listens to everything you say and he applies it uniquely. I mean, he's taking it almost as if he's writing everything down and reviewing it every time he does, something related to that. And again, I'm not suggesting that Colton's something like this. He very well can be. He's 2 years younger. Who knows? But let's say he wasn't. Let's say he was a little less careful, a little bit more uncautious, or a little bit more spontaneous, right? You need, as a parent, to be able to read the differences in your kids and how they approach it, and then modify your style from a coaching perspective, from a hunting and fishing perspective accordingly. And you may decide, I think it's appropriate. What I'm really saying is, I'm answering your question by saying this is what I would do. If Colton, just from a maturity perspective, is not ready, or if he's a little bit too, quick to take a shot, for example, then, you have to be careful on, how the kids compare themselves and that sort of thing. But that's a scenario where I would pull back. I would say, try to do it in a way that he doesn't take it personally, but I try to position it from the perspective of maybe it's a 10 for him, not 8. But so I don't know if that answers your question yet, but that's a little closer to what I think you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that the overall point is it comes down to knowing your child.
Yes.
And reading their maturity, understanding what they are ready for and what they aren't, and taking that really seriously, because I do think that there is a big upside, right, to be able to getting your kid out there and giving them these opportunities, but then there's also this big significant risk. Right. If you take a child out that's relatively young and they have a really negative experience.
Yes.
There's a real risk of, like, they make a bad shot or they make some kind of mistake that ruins it all. So that's something you want to guard against too. So yeah, I'm definitely thinking about that. And so that brings me to another one of these things that I thought a lot about, which is, what about, kind of continuing in this same vein, what about, how you exposed me or taught me about seeing a dead animal, gutting a deer, seeing the blood and gore. I mean, I remember being around, seeing, we've told the stories before, folks have seen it maybe in some of the shows. Like, as a kid, I loved standing next to the buck pole, staring at the dead deer, examining their corpses, looking up into their insides. I was fascinated by all that. But what were you thinking as a dad? Were you worried at all about me, I don't know, about being exposed to that too early? Or can it not be early enough? Because the earlier you are exposed to it, the less it seems like a weird thing to be scared of or worried about. I have thoughts and I've had an approach, but I'm curious what yours was.
Yeah, my attitude towards that is it can't be early enough. Now, I think it needs to be couched from the perspective of, this is part of life. This is part of the respect we have for the animal and for this gift that we have, right, of nature and of deer and fish and whatever wild game we're talking about. But yeah, that's a case where, and again, I think you do need to read the child. Again, this is a really important component of everything we're talking about. So there's not one size fits all. So it may be perfectly fine for Everett. It may not be perfectly fine for Colt, and that's okay. So I think you need to take that into account and allow the kids to kind of help guide that perspective. Now, sometimes it may be that there's maybe a fear of something that might be stronger than it should be. You might want to push back on that a little bit or help mitigate that. But in general, I think you need to read the audience and act accordingly.
Speaking of differences with children, you have me, who became a hunting and fishing fool, right? I'm obsessed with it. It has become the sun that my world revolves around. It has become my passion, my career, all of these things. My life revolves around the outdoors and the natural world. Then we have my sister, Kristen, who does not hunt. I wouldn't say she really fishes. She's fished a handful of times, but she doesn't fish independently. She likes nature. She gets out here and there for some camping and hiking, but it's in no way what my relationship with the outdoor world is.
Yes.
When you look back on your parenting between me and Kristen, is there anything you can point to? I guess my question first, why is that? Do you think that was is that just because of who she is? Or do you think that, and this might be a hard thing to talk about, maybe not, I don't know, but did you parent her in any kind of different way, if you were being honest with yourself, that maybe led to her having a different experience than I did?
So that's a really, really, really good question. And I thought a lot about that because I guess the first honest answer is I really don't know. But there are some things that I guess I think back on and think that maybe there were. So Kristen had a different bent. Her passion, her explicit passion, the thing she talked about, the thing she really seemed to gravitate to was something very different. It was horseback riding and anything related to horses. So we fed that habit, right? We never really tried to push her in a different direction or guide her in a direction. We saw that strong interest, and we thought of that as her passion, and we encouraged it. And as I say, we fed the habit. So that meant finding a person who had horses, who was learning how to ride, who was doing, competitive racing like she did for 10 years, was all those kinds of things. Now, having said that, I think, and Mom and I were very involved in that, right? We were as involved in that as we were with you in hunting and fishing. But looking back in retrospect, and Kristen's made a few comments along the way that lead me to believe that she kind of felt left out, that I favored you for going up to the cabin or going hunting or going fishing or whatever, when maybe there was more of an interest in her doing it than we realized. So, yeah, I think that's the honest answer. I don't really know. And I think she would tease, she would joke about it, but I'm not sure how serious she is, that that I would always take you up, but not take her. But I do kind of look back on that and say, wow, did I miss an opportunity? Should I have spent more time with her? It wasn't a conscious thing, but it's a good question. And unfortunately, I don't have a really good answer for you other than that.
Yeah. So looking back, what would you say? Yeah. Well, actually, before we go here, you mentioned the feed the habit thing, right? You said you did that with me and with her. It was with the horseback riding. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Because I do feel like that has been one of the great lessons I've learned from you, was this idea of feeding the habit. Can you just expand a little bit on what that looked like? More, earlier you talked about that was like buying me gear, but it was more than that. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more and how that helped?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of 3 or 4 things. One is talking about it, having conversations around it, understanding what your interests were around that topic, yours being primarily hunting and fishing and Kristen's being horseback riding, and then learning about it, being an active engager with your child and so that they know that you care about what they care about. And again, this is relationship building, right? This is more than just getting out in the woods. This is about life lessons. So I think that's part of it. Yes, what I saw, and partially with my dad, but that was kind of the age, 30, 40 years ago. But I see this with other people as well, where they kind of, when it gets down to them bringing their kids into their sport, they're more interested in making sure they have the best equipment, the best stuff, whatever it is. And then they either give hand-me-downs to, or they buy the Walmart stuff for their kids. And in some respects, that doesn't matter, right? And kids may be too young or may not necessarily care what kind of rifle they're carrying or whatever. But in many cases, it sends a message, right? It sends a subtle thing that maybe it's not as important, or you're not as important, or whatever. And I'm not talking, again, about buying the best stuff. I'm talking about having them actively participate in that. And then I think the third thing that I think we did with you is we got involved in kind of the community around deer hunting. So we read a lot of magazines. You and I don't remember how many times you and I went to beast feasts and that sort of thing with other hunters, right? We got involved with the community around, our cabin and the people in the cabin, around the cabin that we talked to around the hunting that was going on. So it's just the whole atmosphere, the environment. And I think that's really important. I'd say that's kind of the overall perspective that I would take around that perspective of feeding the habit.
Yeah. I think that if I were to look back on things and say what led me to be who I am, a lot of it was that it was putting rocket fuel behind anything I indicated I was interested in. So It was when I showed that love for hunting and fishing, you were fanning the flames. I didn't have to fight for time to go hunting or fishing. I didn't have to fight for the fishing rod. You saw something that you viewed as positive for me, and then you fanned those flames. You helped make that happen. You were in no way slowing that down. You were helping that. You were giving me the push there and supporting that with gear, with your time. And to your point, the community thing was no small thing. I think just the idea of like being able to be a part of the group, like being with the men up at deer camp, that was pretty transformational for me too. Just getting to like be in the room, hear the stories, be a part of that. That was so, I don't know, maybe you remember from when you were a kid hanging out with your dad and Jerry and those guys. Like,
I do.
You felt like you were bigger than you were, and you were part of this very exciting, manly, adult thing that was like a dream, and you got to be a part of it, and that was pretty special. So I can point to a lot of things like that I look back on that were great, that worked, that got me to where I am. What about what didn't work? Do you remember anything? Is there anything when you look back on raising me that you realize like, man, this is not working well, or I really screwed that up, or I made a big mistake there?
So yes, but it's probably not in a way that you would expect. And I kind of alluded to this before. It's not that I screwed up or we screwed up in helping you discover your sport or your passion for your sport. It's more that moment of recognition where I realized that the mantle had kind of been transferred from me to you. And that is, I think we all, again, especially men, maybe not exclusively men, we all have a need to feel like we're good at something, we're successful at something, we can beat our competitors, this just overall sense. And I think whether we acknowledge it or not, we all want to feel that way with our kids as well until they're adults, right? I think we all consciously think, well, when they're adults, they're having their own careers, but when your 12-year-old son can outbeat you, outfish you in a tournament, that's a little humbling. And I think that's okay. I think that's what I learned is I started shifting my perspective from personal success to celebrating your success and not seeing that as a personal affront or somehow as a weakness. It was a strength. It's great to see your kids, and then actually step back to a different role. So I would say certainly in the last 20 years since you've been in this role and your passion has grown and your knowledge has grown, the roles have changed. So now I'm the mentee and you're the mentor, and that's fine.
Was that hard when that first began? Did you resist that? Did we ever butt heads, or did you ever want to put me in my place, tell me to shut up and listen? I mean, what was that experience like?
Well, I think we did butt heads a little bit, right? And you probably can recall a few of these instances where I would say something, you say, well, Dad, that's not quite right. And I think, again, going back to relationships, our relationship is such that it was fine. But there is a little bit of personal pride and perspective. That relationship changes. Just like, kind of similar to the process of aging. As you get older, your role changes a little bit, and I think you need to do that gracefully. Is really what I'm trying to say. Recognize and celebrate and encourage the success of your kids. In your case, I mean, you way far surpassed in every aspect of hunting anything I ever did, and I think that's phenomenal. Now,
and fishing too. Fishing too. Don't forget that.
Well, fishing too. Thanks a lot. But it's not just accepting that. It's also recognizing that I can. It's okay, and I want to learn and grow through you. So that's okay, and that's tremendous. And because we have that relationship, we have fun doing it. So we can joke about it. That's I think that's really important. But I think that is a risk, I think, and maybe could be threatening. Some dads and some moms who are teaching their kids how to hunt or fish, when they go through that transition, that can be a little bit threatening at times.
Yeah. So we were talking about this the other day. You and I were up at deer camp. We were driving home. We were in the drive-thru at McDonald's, and I brought up a statistic I recently heard, which was something along the lines of, on average, the average American will have experienced 80% of their time with their child by the time their child turns 18. So 80% of the time you will get with your kids over your entire life happens, 80% happens before they turn 18 and are out the door. That was a very eye-opening thing for me. So what I'm getting at here is that those years where your child is living at home and you have this close, intimate opportunity to experience these hunting and fishing memories and adventures and outings, that's like a fleeting thing. It's this. I've been having this realization myself as it's gone so fast. Like, it seems like yesterday I didn't have kids, and now I have a 5-year-old going on 6 who can do almost everything, and who I'm realizing is so quickly going to be like you're talking about. He's going to be surpassing me, and he's going to be out there doing his own things. And I guess I'm just realizing this thing is flying in front of my eyes, and it's something I feel like I'm still trying to figure out how to do it. And before I even figure out how to do it, it's going to be done. So when you look back on those years with me and Kristen. You look at those 18 years when we were there at home with you, and I was going to Kenrovin with you as a kid, and we were sitting in the blind together, or we were in the boat up in Canada catching walleye, or we were walking through the swamp. 2 things I would ask. Number 1, what do you cherish the most from those years? What stands out above everything else as the great takeaway from those years? And then secondly, do you have any regrets? Do you regret anything that either happened or did not happen over those years?
Good questions. So what do I cherish the most? It's the one-on-one time. It is so our sport, whether it was hunting or fishing, it was the rallying point. It was the thing that we were doing together. It was the context, but that was providing the context for some of the best conversations, some of the most intimate moments, some of the most vulnerable moments that I've ever had with you. And same thing's true with Kristen. Now with Kristen, it was a little bit different because it was usually mom and I, and we were usually doing group things, not so much one-on-one. And I'd say that's my regret. My regret with Kristen is I wish I had found a one-on-one activity where I could have spent more one-on-one time with her. It's really, the old adage of, quality time and that sort of thing. In my opinion, that's bunk. There is no such thing as quality time. There's just time and focus and personal one-on-one time with your child in whatever context, hopefully a positive, encouraging and fun environment. Those are the opportunities. That's the opportunity for those relationships to grow. What I love so much about hunting and fishing is that it's not just an opportunity for the two of you to get together for a moment. It's usually at least hours long, if not days long. So you just have this wonderful context to be close, to be vulnerable, to talk about things you normally don't. And you and I always joke about that, right, Mark? We have some of our best conversations in the car going up to the cabin and coming back to the cabin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the opportunity. And so, my only regret is kind of going back to what you said a few minutes ago. That time, that first 18 years goes by so fast. And one of the challenges I think we've had, and I think most parents who have good relationships with their kids have, is you just wish you had more. You just wish during the period of time when your kids are young, you're so focused on your career, you're so focused on things that in the big scheme of things, frankly, just don't matter much, that by the time you realize that, kids are grown and they're off doing their thing. And now you try to make up for it by doing that with your grandkids, right? So, the younger you can realize that, the sooner you develop those kinds of habits with your family, I think the happier you'll be, the happier they'll be, and the longer those relationships and deeper those relationships will be.
Yeah. If you, for whatever reason, were told that today is the last day ever that you can give your son a piece of advice when it comes to this, hunting and fishing, raising children to become hunters and anglers, to appreciate the outdoors, when it comes to all of this, if today, right now, was your last opportunity to leave me with two thoughts, you've got two final thoughts of everything we've talked about here, or maybe something we haven't talked about. If you had to synthesize it down, if you had to distill everything we've covered down to the two simple things that I absolutely must take away from this conversation and carry with me for the rest of my life, and you will not have another opportunity ever to tell me these things, what would those two things be, Dad?
Two things. First, find a way to build strong, deep relationships with your kids. And again, there is no such thing as quality time. Quality time is, if I spend an hour with them a week doing something, that's enough. It's not. Find a way to make time one-on-one with your kids. And two, find a way to help them feel important. And what I mean by that is not haughty, but that they're loved unconditionally, and that there's nothing in this world that can make you love them any less. And I think that's part of what being a good parent is. It's building that sense of self-worth in your child, that sense of confidence, that sense of at the end of the day, I know who I am. I know I am loved. I know that nothing, no matter how rough the situations in life are, that I'm going to make it. And I think the time, it sounds cliche, but I truly believe that time in the woods, the time in the boat, the time in the stream, if you approach it from that perspective, is the way you do that. Or at least one of the ways you do that.
Yeah. Well, wise words, Dad. I'm very fortunate to have had you teaching me those things and raising me that way. So thank you for that. And thank you for chatting about all this publicly in front of, well, not in front of, but verbally in front of a whole lot of folks. I appreciate it. I think this has been great.
Thank you, Mark.
And let's just say I'll remove that rule off the table. You are allowed to continue giving me advice into the future. All right, I will continue to take your wisdom and insights because I still got a lot to learn. So don't feel like you're stuck.
Funny how that's completely turned around. I'm usually asking you questions and learning from you and getting all that. So, remember that whole, the tables are turned thing. Mm-hmm. But I think that's, as you develop your relationship with your kids into adulthood, those relationships become friendships as opposed to mentoring and coaching, right? And I am thrilled and blessed to have the relationship with you and Kristen.
Yeah. It's pretty good stuff. And I guess on that note, let's wrap this one up, and hopefully we can come back and do another podcast a few years down the road from now, and we can be talking about how Everett got his first deer or his first turkey, or the great memories we've been able to build up at Kenroven and some success that we've had up there. Hopefully, I trust we're going to have some good stories in the next 5 to 10 years to share.
Sounds great, Mark. Thank you.
All right. There you have it. Thank you for tuning in. I hope there was something interesting in here. Hope you're able to garner a few insights, something that will help inspire you in your own journey, either as a parent now or down the road if that's in the cards for you. Like I said at the top, this is the pinnacle of hunting and fishing, in my opinion, right? I don't care about the big bucks. I don't care about the trophy trout. Bringing our kids into this world, into this tradition, into this pursuit and lifestyle, man, there's no bigger win than that. There's no more meaningful trophy experience and achievement and way of life than sharing these outdoor pursuits with our kids. So let's give it the same attention, passion, and obsession that we do for our deer hunting, our fishing, whatever it is. So thank you. Thanks for taking time to dive into this with me. Thanks for being here. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.